And hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another AWS on Stack Overflow. This is where I work with you, the community, to go through answering some Stack Overflow questions, discuss some AWS topics, and just generally have a nice chat about AWS. Who we got so far? Hex Editing, I like that name. Welcome aboard. True Rocha, greetings from Brazil. Would love to hear where all of you folks are from. Hey Jelly, good to see you online there again. You've been playing with lots of Stack Overflow questions in the meantime. Great to see all of your names on Stack Overflow as well. Feel free if you want to let me know what your usernames are on Stack Overflow. You'll find my details in my Stack Overflow user profile. You'll find my email address in there as well. So, welcome everyone. As I said, we're going to look at a bit of Stack Overflow, answer some AWS questions. I do this as part of my job, so I thought, why not do it as part of a stream, and that way we can involve a wider community. For those of you who are not too familiar with Stack Overflow, Ramesh from India, g'day to you too. G'day is the traditional Australian greeting for good day. So those of you not familiar with Stack Overflow, it's a site where you often do a Google search and you will end up on the Stack Overflow. Let's try that. Let's say I'm searching for SSH to EC2, and I just do a general Google search on that. Somebody's got a YouTube video that pops up straight away. I hope they get lots of hits. We've got some documentation, some blogs. A Medium post. That's pretty good. And where is Stack Overflow? Oh my gosh, Stack Overflow isn't until about halfway down the page. So often you'll find links to Stack Overflow. Oh, this is a bit of an old one. Answering questions about particular topics. Hans Sopina from Colombia, welcome. I'm going to try and pronounce it. Barakia, that where you're from. And yo also to Fichivijivim. Great username for pronunciation there. So, greetings to all of you. So lots of people end up on Stack Overflow doing technical searches for information. And the thing I like about Stack Overflow is whenever I put an answer on Stack Overflow, it can be seen by many people. In fact, if I go to my Stack Overflow profile here, it comes up and says that I've reached 4.9 million people. So the estimated number of times people viewed your helpful posts based on page views of your questions and questions where you wrote a highly ranked answer. That's quite interesting. What that means, I guess, is that it's good to have people upvote your answers, because if people upvote your answer, then it's felt that that is worth publicizing to more people. Mr. Bob's back again. Oh no, you've got to run away. It's a shame. Can you teach me, somebody says, how to get my Cloud Associate certification? So if you are referring to Cloud Practitioner, you're talking about Associate. I'll spend a few minutes talking about that then. Let's say AWS certifications. Let's do a quick search for that. And so you're probably talking there about you're talking about a Cloud Associate level certification. So one recommendation I would say is play with the services. And guess what? Answering questions on Stack Overflow is a great way to learn the services. Another thing I tend to say is read the documentation. It's amazing how many people do not read the AWS documentation. I don't mean read every word. I mean scroll through it, look at the pretty pictures, look at topics that are interesting, relevant for your particular certification. And another thing that I will say is watch the AWS certification quiz show. So I'm involved. I'm the producer of this show that you'll see on, we are coming back next week. So the time that I'm talking to you currently, minus 1 day, minus 1 hour will be on air. It's 10 a.m. in Sydney time. And each week we go through a number of sample certification exam questions and the thinking behind how you would answer those questions. So this time next week, minus 1 day, 1 hour, we'll be starting with Cloud Practitioner certification exam, which is the base entry level. And each week we normally go through different exams, and we'll probably be then returning to the Solutions Architect exam, which is the most popular exam that's out there. So the bottom line is anything you do on AWS is great knowledge to have, and they'll help you do the certification exams. Also, feel free to ask questions on Reddit. There is a certification subreddit where you can ask for information, and a lot of people here, person talking about cloud practitioner. Exams are a bit funny at the moment because everything's online. The exam centers have shut down, and they're doing this process where you do an online exam where they have a virtual proctor, who's a person who's watching you. So you look around the room, make sure you're not cheating. And I've heard some occasional problems. If your internet connection's not great, it might cut in, cut out, and have things. So it's a bit of a trying time at the moment with COVID. But it's certainly a good time also to study for your certification exam. So if you have any questions, by all means ask them on the Reddit channel. Join in for our CQ show, and there's lots of resources available online. Also, what should I start with if I'm just starting out in cloud computing? I'll leave this for the community to answer. Folks, what do you think about just starting out? To me, it's normally just building something, getting some experience and seeing how it goes. I personally would also recommend watching. I keep plugging this each time because I believe in it greatly. Having a watch of some of our, oops, that's not what I wanted in there. I wanted this URL. And fantastic. So this is a web page I put together of all of the reInvent videos from last year, and you can look for various ones. There are intro videos, 100 level, 200 level, up to 400 level in here. And if you just want to get started, so, start by watching some of the keynotes. They'll give you a good idea. But if we look for the word introduction to DevOps, my first, nope. New launches are good because they give you overviews of various services. Everything is good. I have converted these to podcast format here at the top, so you can also listen to them on your favorite podcast app. Any information you can get in about them, but certainly start with the core services, things like Ec2, S3, our relational database service. Mr. Bob suggests following tutorials and getting your hands dirty. There are some very good hands-on labs, on tutorials. There's tutorials and there's labs. We will get around to answering Stack Overflow questions soon. If you search for hands-on tutorials, you'll find this thing on the AWS website where they have a large number of how-to type things and how to get WordPress. So this is a 10-minute thing using Amazon Lightsail, which is our simple instance launching service. And it'll take you through step by step exactly what you can do to use the services. This will run in your own account, so be aware you might cost you $1 or $2 to get used. There is also a service out there called Quick Labs, and I have just got a delivery at the door, so I'm going to just yell at my son for a moment. Excuse me for one sec. The fun of COVID, asking family members to go to the front door. So here is a service at something called, actually I'll go to the official one, amazon.aws. Front door, please. And my dog is going to get it as well. Fantastic. Amazon.quicklabs.com. Thank you, doggo. Okay. The dog will calm down in a moment. So here at amazon.quicklabs.com, we have some hands-on labs. And the great thing about this is these labs provide their own environment where you can use the AWS service and you don't need your own account. Some of these labs are free, so just spin them up and use them. Other ones you've got to buy some credits or something like a $50 per month membership fee. So that's another great way to get some hands-on experience. Otherwise, pop around to Reddit and they'll give you some good advice there. Okay, let's return to Stack Overflow. And I have bookmarked a number of questions I thought would be interesting, although let's have a look if there's any new questions that have just appeared. How do I get the rate of the schedule that triggered a Lambda? I have multiple events schedules attached to a single Lambda. The Lambda does different things based on the schedule. I'll put a link to this question in case any of you want to jump in and answer it for me. The logic is super simple, so much simpler to attach multiple schedules to the same function instead of creating multiple separate functions. I can pass the event name for the event. I still want them to, I don't want to set names. Okay. What this person I think is saying is they want to know which schedule triggered their Lambda function. And I do happen to have an answer for this. Let's go into CloudWatch. So I discovered this one time when looking through CloudWatch events. So CloudWatch events is the thing that lets you create rules that are triggered at various times. So if I go in here and create a rule, I can say define a schedule. I then want to add a target, which is a Lambda function, let's say, run my stopinator. And I discovered that you can put in some different input to appear in here. Normally it passes through the event. So let's say you have an event triggered by S3. When S3, an object is created in S3, you can trigger a Lambda function. It will pass through the information about that event. But you can also pass through some constant text in here. And I can say, hey, this particular thing was triggered by schedule 1. Thank you, doggy. So let's provide this. So when there's a question on Stack Overflow and you think you know the answer, you are, of course, invited to come down and type an answer here. If I can spell. Now, he said, it was in the question here really, how do I get the rate of the schedule that triggered a Lambda? So instead of giving him the rate, let's do a picture. It is also possible in Stack Overflow to have a picture that you save. Oh, let's do the whole thing here. And the trick is, I'm using my Mac to save a pretty picture here. We'll go to disk and I can include it. When you add the Lambda trigger, what's it called here? It's called a constant. I spell behavior with a U because I'm from Australia. Hey, BSD guy, good to have you online there. Oops, somebody's commented on here. Marson, my great answerer. You can add that metadata to Lambda tags. That's another way of going here. So let's see if I can add this picture in. I say, please browse. It'll be on my desktop. Probably this one. It adds it to Imgur. How do you pronounce that? Imgur, something like that. I keep worrying that these services that host pictures like Imgur, somebody puts a link in there, it's viewed once and it hangs around forever. And if it's on a proper service, then every image will be replicated multiple times on different devices. And the amount of data being consumed in the world when somebody just takes a little screenshot or family member takes a picture of them, no one's ever going to look at that picture and it's replicated 3 times in a data center. And I keep feeling guilty over the data that I'm consuming forever after until some service goes bust or something. It's going to be Imgur. Oh, Imgur. Publius. That makes sense. Imgur would be the name of that sort of thing. I'm a good boy. I will always put a link in here. CloudWatch events rule. That gives it some metadata so that it appears nice in search engines. Put a link here, and if we look at the preview, yay, it should hopefully come out nicely there. I'm going to say that's probably enough. Very good. Poor Noobs says, how do you transfer metrics of a copy from a local path to a Snowball edge using the S3 adapter? I looked through the white paper, but I can't seem to find what I'm looking for. First gen Snowball would automatically output metrics at the end of the copy and errors. I don't know, but that sounds like an excellent question you could ask on Stack Overflow. Now, it's worth mentioning that Stack Overflow officially is a site for programming Q&A. So that's not really a programming question, but more and more people are asking Stack Overflow questions on there. And hey, if it reaches the audience, then that's fantastic. One thing I do know about Snowball. So Snowball, of course, is a, let's have a look at it, a pretty picture. Image AWS Snowball. Snowball is a appliance. Think of it as a computer that gets delivered to your door, and it contains lots and lots of hard disks inside of it. You can actually chain up multiple of them together, have a lot bigger storage, and it's pretty neat. On the front of it, it's got this e-ink display powered by Kindle technology. So it says, here is the address to deliver it to. So FedEx or somebody comes along and picks up this whole machine. No need to put in a box. It's hardened cover. It's got those little handles on it as well. They pick it up, deliver it to your site. It then shows the configuration of how you can plug it into your network and get going. When you're finished, the e-ink display says, please return to, and you can just call up the courier. They'll pick up the whole unit and return it out there as well. And it attaches as a network device, and you can copy lots of things across. And the S3 adapter, if I've got this correct, was a recent change where the Snowball can pretend that it is S3. So you can use all of your favorite software. Programmatic tool lets you transfer data between your on-premises. It basically makes the Snowball look like S3. You just put it to a different endpoint, and you can use all the standard AWS CLI commands to copy things up and down, or if your programs work with S3, you can use it to send with Snowball as well. So a really nice way of going, but I have no idea how to get the transfer metrics coming out of there, poor noobs. So ask a question on Stack Overflow or hop into Reddit. Okay, first question done. Yay! Any other interesting questions came in here? Otherwise, unable to see the console logs in an instance. I'm developing, there's a bug. I've got console logs, I won't do that one. Now, one thing you will notice, there's lots of questions. I calculated about 3,000 AWS tagged questions a month on Stack Overflow, so one person won't be able to answer all of them. Upload and route directory. Let's pop into some that I bookmarked earlier and see if anyone's managed to provide answers or not in here. Dynamodb replication across accounts. I'm looking for a better way to replicate data. You say data or data? From one AWS account, Dynamodb, to another account. I know this can be done using Lambda triggers and streams. Is there something like global tables which exists in AWS? So I actually put a comment on this one earlier today. So Dynamodb, our NoSQL database. CloudWatch can be used. True Rosha, are you talking about this particular question? So Dynamodb replication. Oh, you were asking about the previous question. Dynamodb originally was just one table in one region. It replicates across availability zones. It's a regional service. If you wanted to go across multiple regions, we added something called global tables. And a global table replicates tables between multiple regions. And there's a pretty picture. Global tables. I think it's this one. Pretty pictures. Yay. So this one says that you can replicate your tables between multiple regions, so it's available for global users to use, reduce latency, etc. However, this person is asking about the ability to replicate between accounts, and global tables won't do that. So there is a reference here to Lambda triggers and streams, and this is something worth knowing about. This might appear on certain certification exams. Dynamodb Streams. So everything that happens in DynamoDB can be emitted in a stream. So you can attach a stream to a table. And so your application uses DynamoDB, stores stuff in DynamoDB, and as data gets added, removed, or updated in DynamoDB, it can trigger a DynamoDB stream, which is effectively a kinesis stream. And the record says, hey, in this table, this record changed. Here's the old value of the record. Here's the new value of the record, or it's just a new record, or it's just been deleted. And you can effectively receive a stream of those. You could then have a Lambda function subscribe to that stream, and the Lambda function could look at the information that was added or removed or changed in that DynamoDB and do something such as go and insert it in another DynamoDB table in another account. So it sounds like a lot of work, and it sort of is, because every record update triggers a Lambda function which goes and inserts in another one. But that's got to happen anyway if you're going to replicate data. It's a bit like databases that use this CDC, change data capture. Whenever something changes, they see in the log files that it changes and they can replicate it to somewhere else. Muglason says, can you send that to AWS EventBridge to send it to another account's EventBridge? Oh, that's very interesting. EventBridge is the new fancy name and better capabilities for CloudWatch events. Let's pop into CloudWatch. So CloudWatch events started off as a sort of smaller model and then expanded to, so here it was, we have this thing called event buses in CloudWatch, but we can also now go directly to Amazon EventBridge, which is effectively the same thing. So it allows you to have a event sharing mechanism bus thing in your account, so events get sent in and things subscribe. So in the old days, people used to use SQS, a simple queuing service, for a lot of decoupling. You put a message into a queue, something pulls it out of the queue. The more modern method is events, where you send messages to an event bus, things subscribe to the event bus, and that triggers them. So rather than having direct connections, you publish and subscribe to events, and that way multiple systems can react to the same events without you having to change any code. So would that work? Let's see. You would have to have DynamoDB Streams will only send to a Kinesis queue, I think. Let's check DynamoDB Stream EventBridge. So somebody has written a library, serverless application that forwards events from a DynamoDB stream to an EventBridge event bus. So that could indeed be a nice way of doing it. Yeah, another way, poor noobs, yeah, if you want to send certain messages to certain systems, SQS is not great because once a message is consumed, it's gone, so you can't have multiple consumers. You can do this sort of fan-out operation where you can send something to SNS, our simple notification service, which can then have two SQS queues subscribed and they can consume messages, for which there is a brilliant video. I wonder if I can find it. YouTube AWS, it's an old reInvent video. reInvent SQS. It's a really, really old one. And the really nice thing in this particularly old video, if I can find it, is they did this demo where they sent data to an SNS topic and consumed it in SQS, and then consumed another SQS one, and they started sending millions and millions of messages, and each service could consume from their own queue. So it worked really, really well. Can't find that immediately there, but really great way of doing it. Was there something in the search results about us doing it directly? EventBridge examples? No. But I like that idea. If you can stream it to EventBridge, then the other system would have to listen to the EventBridge and put it in. So you're adding a few steps, so it's not as clean as just writing a Lambda function to go and specifically put in DynamoDB, but it's sort of future-proofing it, so you can do more handling in the future there. So feel free, if you wish, to, if I put this one in the link, trigger to Lambda, if you want to suggest EventBridge or something on there, there is the question. You're most welcome to put that in there. Next question. How to save millions of files in S3 so that arbitrary future searches on key path values are fast? By the way, do you like it when I sort of read through the question? Is it annoying when I read the question out loud? Would you rather that I just be quiet and we can read it all together in silence? Let me know what you think. You're my viewers. I'm doing this for you. So see what you think. My company has millions of files in an S3 bucket. Every so often I have to search for files whose key paths contain some text. This is an extremely slow process because I have to iterate through all files. So this is a common thing where S3, there's no limit to the number of objects you can store in S3. Out loud, fantastic. You all just want to play games and listen at the same time, don't you? So the problem with scanning through S3 is when you make an API call to list the contents of the bucket, you only get back 1,000 records at a time. So you have to keep iterating every time to get more and more of them. And if he's talking about millions, that means you need thousands of API requests to say, please list me the contents of S3. And that takes a long time. There are some smart things you can do, like segment the bucket. So you might say you start at A, you start at B, you start at C, and you can do it all in parallel, but it doesn't tend to work very well. So this person's saying, how can I do a quick search for objects in S3 based on the keys? And this person who answered, who I see a lot of questions, answers out there, Snowball. If you're watching Snowball, let me know. Oh, Athena, that's an interesting idea, poor noobs. Let's think about that in a moment. So Snowball is pointing out that S3 is an object store. If you really want to have a good listing of all the file names, then store it in a database. Same thing on your computer. Just looking at Jelly here. Jelly's linked a video. I'll come back to that in a second. Some modern operating systems are getting really good, and instead of just scanning directories all the time, they build up their own database. So you'll see this in Windows with the search capabilities on the Mac. It's much easier now to do a search across your whole operating system because they index it in a way that's more like a database. So what some people do is they create a Lambda function that triggers on changes to an S3 bucket when you add or delete objects, and they update a database, and then you can go and query the database to see what files are there. And that can be a lot faster than trying to scan all of them. However, there's another service that is worth knowing about, and that is S3 Inventory. And it's amazing how many people do not know about S3 Inventory. This is a service where we provide, I think it's a daily or weekly CSV file, and we can dump it down. Oh, not just CSV, we can also provide it now in ORC or Parquet, which are columnar based, which is ideal for Athena, as poor noob suggested. So by getting this regular CSV file that contains a complete listing of all the objects in the bucket together with their metadata, and I think you can even choose what you want to be inside of it. Where does it say here? So what's included in it? Bucket name, key name, version. All the different versions of objects. That can take a long time to normally get. E-tag, which is a MD5 calculation. So if you ever want to verify that your backups, for example, have correctly copied to the cloud, you can use the MD5 E-tag. Not always guaranteed to be the exact MD5 if you're using multi-part upload. BSD guide. Too many smart people in this channel. We want to make more smart people in the channel and more smart people answering questions on Stack Overflow. That's how I learn everything. Answering questions makes me go out and want to learn about it. So that's how I discover all these things. So lots of things can be in here. So let's go back and answer this questioner, user 554481, who obviously hasn't chosen their own username, but they put their own profile pic in. They're in San Francisco. That's very nice. Built my own self-driving toy car for fun. I'm sorry, I'm going to be distracted and have a look at the question asker's self-driving car. Wow. They've got a webcam and looks like collision detectors on the front of their car. And not much inside. That's not even a Raspberry Pi or something. Bootstrap JS. Wow. Oh well, that's if any of you are interested in finding out more, I will put a link to that in the chat. Very good. So you might consider using S3 Inventory. I have a pre-link because I do this so much. What is it going to do with all these files? He wants to find them. Interested in using prefix. He wants to do regex searches over them. Seeing people say things. I wonder if you can just use it in Excel directly. Write a script. S3 inventory is great, but what if you want real-time updates? So to keep track of the usage of each user, says Denga. So real-time updates via Lambda would be a way of doing it. So whenever a new object gets added, deleted, you update Dynamodb, for example, using a Lambda function. However, I like this. You say to keep track of the usage of each user. When you store data in S3, the data does not store who stored the data. In fact, I see a lot of questions on this. People say, hey, can I identify which people started my EC2 instances? And the answer is no. You can ask them to put a tag on it. You might be able to go back and look at CloudTrail to see which user made the API call to launch the instance, but there's no easy indication of who did things like that. So if you wanted to keep track of the usage of each user using S3 inventory, only if things are tagged or you're using subdirectories within there. Master, whoa, we just got a raid of 54 people. Lots of icons coming up. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name is John Rotenstein. I work at AWS and we are answering AWS questions on Stack Overflow. So welcome to everyone. Thank you for all the icons and the Pikachus. Why is Pikachu so happy? What is this you're saying? So this is a community answering of Stack Overflow questions. If you're into technical topics, if you enjoy landing on Stack Overflow, come along with us as we answer some Stack Overflow questions. Come along and join in. So I think we've finished answering that particular question. Let's move on to another one here. Stack Overflow is the programmer that does all the work for me. So here's a very interesting thing. Stack Overflow has a license associated with it. And I saw a really great thing. Image Stack Overflow copy paste. Have you seen this fake book? Come on, Goodreads, you can bring it up. Enlarge the cover. Copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. If this was a real book, then it would be a very, very popular book. Is it a real book? Cutting corners to meet arbitrary management deadlines. It apparently is a real book. No, it can't be a real book. 9 pages. It is not a real book. Okay. So what was I trying to say? So Stack Overflow uses an MIT license, and I don't know where the official links are, but here it is. It's an MIT license, and the MIT license they cover is one of these things like Linux where, hey, feel free to use the code you have here, but you've got to make your code available for free. So there is a possibility that if you just copy and paste code from Stack Overflow, you might be legally obligated to make the product that you derive from Stack Overflow available for free to other people. So that's not really good if you're writing the next Facebook and suddenly you have to make the source code for Facebook available for free to everyone. So when I post some code on Stack Overflow, my company has said, hey, please add an identifier that says you can use the MIT 0 license. I believe it is. And this is a no attribution license that basically says do what you want and you won't be held for anything in there. So if you do want your code to be available to others, you can tag it as being MIT 0 and be very careful. If you're working for a company that has lots of legal people and you copy some code, you might get into trouble for just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. I've ruined Bobcat's copy paste dreams. Cool. So let's pick another thing here. SNS stands for Simple Notification Service. It's a service on AWS that allows you to publish and subscribe message notification topics. So let's say you have a program and it encountered an error and you want to send an email to the developer. Instead of inserting lots of email code, you can have it post a message to a simple notification service topic, and people can subscribe to that topic. They can subscribe using email, SNS. It can push messages into a queue. It can send messages to an HTTP endpoint, etc. Use SES instead. So SES, our simple email service, is the service that allows you to send traditional emails, but SNS can also send them out. They don't look as pretty, but it can handle it nicely. So this person, Apurvanand, who has 1 point, therefore I presume is a fairly new Stack Overflow user. Member for 2 years. I often see this, that people have been members for a long time, but they have very little reputation on the site because they signed up at some stage and they haven't really participated. So it's great to see people coming here. This person has both answered and asked some questions online. So it's great to see that. They haven't asked for a few years. Is it possible to send different messages to different email endpoints having different subscription ARN? If possible, suggest some way of using message filtering. All emails subscribing to the same topic. Requirement is to send reward points balance based on an email which is being fetched from a query, either REST or DynamoDB query. Wow. So it looks like this person is actually wanting to send personalized emails to each person to say, hey, your points balance is 100 points, go and buy a blender. This is not a good use case for SNS. So SNS, you normally just send one message to a topic, it then fans out and all subscribers receive the same message. There is no way to you can say send this message to email users and this message to SMS users, so they're smaller, but you can't modify the content of the message per receiver. SNS topics also have the ability to filter, which is where you can say, sorry, the internet is slow here in Australia. This is what it's like living at the other end of the world when most resources are in America. So you can share the speed of the internet with me here. I'm broadcasting from Sydney, Australia, where it is currently 12:45 on Thursday. So we're ahead of the times, unless you're in New Zealand, in which case already after me. Anyway, so SNS message filtering. By default, all subscribers receive every message published to a topic. To receive a subset, a subscriber can assign a filter policy. So what this says is that if somebody wants to subscribe to a topic, they can say, only give me the messages with these particular attributes, and they won't get them all. That, however, does not solve the problem here because he wants to selectively send one to every subscriber. While theoretically you could subscribe each subscriber with their own filter policy, there's not much use doing that because then you're just sending one message to one user when you send a message to a topic. Poor Noob says, this is what I was trying to do. It's a custom subscription service. Yibzum says, just push the whole docs library to your nearest edge location. That's for my speed. Yeah, I started downloading the documentation one time, and then I realized web search is much easier. So problem 1, they can't do personalized emails. Point 2, filtering is pretty useless. And what would you use for this thing? Now, there's another AWS service that I don't really understand, and that is this thing called Pinpoint. There are so many AWS services, you can't learn them all. Pinpoint helps you engage your customers by sending them email, SMS, voice messages, and push notifications. You can use it to send targeted messages such as promotions, retention campaigns, as well as transactional messages. So this seems like the more appropriate service. Unfortunately, I have no knowledge of Pinpoint aside from what I've just read to you. So let's see if we can offer this dear reader some suggestions. So is this entertaining for you folks who've dropped in on this raiding party? Never seen someone answer live Stack Overflow questions, have you? You think they just materialize automatically in the air? Stack Overflow uses Markdown, so I'm getting pretty good at writing Markdown in there to bold and italicize. Amazon Pinpoint. And I can go here and copy the marketing text. Any other comments before I send this off? Whoa. Lacroix. Who is Lacroix? Lacroix won't respond to us. Okay, I don't know what I'm getting myself into with this raiding party. Cool. Another question done for the day. I'll direct your attention up here to some numbers that are appearing on my screen. This 200 tells me that since I last looked at my reputation, I have scored 200 reputation on Stack Overflow. You get reputation by answering a question, and you get reputation by being upvoted on an answer to your question. And the upvoting helps Stack Overflow figure out, hey, this person is pretty good at answering questions. The community thinks their answers are great. Let's reward that person. And my personal goal is to get 200 points a day. And the reason for that is I get a badge if I get lots of days with 200 points. So I get slightly upset when I see days like this where I only scored 170 points, which was unfortunate. If I go into my reputation dashboard here, and see the days where I passed 200 points. It's this little horizontal line here. So I did lots of question answering from my Friday last week, which I think was this one here. And I did lots of things, and it looks like I went over it on my Tuesday as well. But I get a little sad when I don't quite hit that line on there. Why does it say I've got no reputation on Sunday? I think it's because a lot of people don't do tech on the weekend. I don't understand. Why isn't everyone doing Stack Overflow every day of the week? No one voted for my answers on that particular day, so that's sad. So there is Pinpoint. Hopefully they can make some use out of that. Oh, the other thing that's up here is my little inbox, and it tells me if people have come back and made a comment or somehow changed one of the questions that I've been looking at. So if I have a look at both of these questions that it is highlighted for me, this is a question that was created back in June 2019, so around about a year ago. Hey, Draws with Kitties, welcome back. Good to have you in here. Yibsvim says, check out Master Mindo's Twitch channel. Is doing some great work teaching people DevOps and AWS in particular. Oh, that's really good. I'm going to make a note of that. Master Mindo. Twitch. Master Mindo. Just do a shout out to Master Mindo since he raided across to here. Not going to play a video, but let's have a look at some of the videos that Master Mindo has had before. Master Mind EO. Thank you. Master Mind EO. No, Master Mind. Master, I'm going to type this correctly. Master MNDIO. Science and Technology channels, fantastic. CLI, CloudFront, S3. Oh, it warms my heart. That looks fantastic. I'll certainly have a look at some of those videos myself. Oh, I shall put that link in for other people in my Twitch chat. Fantastic. So this is a question from a year ago, and it looks like somebody has come along, and 19 minutes ago they added a comment to an answer that I gave a year ago. And there's nothing here to particularly worry about. That's good. Sometimes I see people come along and they ask a question related to what's above. Like I had one the other day where I had a formula that could figure out if something was within 2 days of it. And somebody said, how would you modify it to answer if it was within 1 hour? So I gave a little answer. Then they came back and went, how do I do blah, blah, blah? And it was a totally different question. So I politely asked them, please create a new question on Stack Overflow rather than asking in a comment. So little minor variations are sometimes okay in a comment, but whole new questions are, oh, this is the one we answered before. And Red is the person who asked the question. They've seen the answer. This is real time, folks. Is that a property? I can't find it here. Maybe this is a wrong resource type. Sam. He's using Sam, our serverless application manager thing. He's wrapping it. So I know that Sam uses CloudFormation templates. So if it is creating a event source serverless application model, thanks kitties, you can see that I don't use SAM a lot, but I do use CloudFormation a lot. So what we can say is CloudFormation CloudWatch event, and have a look at what CloudFormation offers here. You can define in CloudFormation a CloudWatch rule, and the rule, what are we looking at here? It's in the target section on the right here. So if we go into targets, so type target, and this target type contains a thing called, I think it's input. Valid JSON passed to the target. So let's update that here. I'll add another comment. The rule has a target contains an input field. Fantastic. Real-time answering with strangers. So one interesting thing about Stack Overflow is there is no chat system. You can't go in and chat to somebody. There are chat rooms, and Stack Overflow chat rooms. Sometimes if people ask too many questions, too many comments on a question, it says, hey, can you go off and take this outside? Can you carry on a conversation in a chat room? So you'll see some of these chat rooms created, and they'll have some funny names like this. Discussion between Daiichi and KJ Hughes. So this is where the question has carried over into a chat room, so it doesn't fill up lots of comments. So it's a good way to have a bit of a direct interaction between these people. But you can't specifically send a message to someone unless you both go to the same room. There are some popular rooms that are here, however. There are, for example, a Stack Overflow close vote review. So behind the scenes on Stack Overflow, lots of people work to make the site good. So if somebody puts a spam link and you want to remove it, or somebody puts a question in an answer which is not allowed and should be in a comment, you can mark all these things, and a whole lot of moderators go through and try to improve the quality of things out there. One of these moderation topics is called close requests. And a close request, if I go to Stack Overflow, I've got a little button up here that talks about review queues. And it's saying, hey, John, I've earned enough reputation to be able to go here and review some suggested edits or first posts, etc. So close votes, let's have a look at close votes. This is where people have marked questions that should be closed, such as their duplicate questions or they're off topic for the site. So this thing is coming up here and saying, hey, this person has asked a question about replacing not a number with null hyphen pandas, whatever it is. Here is a duplicate question that somebody has marked and they think that that is the answer, and it's asking me to confirm whether that is the case. Or I might go into first posts. First posts is where new users, hopefully lots of you, please sign up to Stack Overflow. And so you can start voting people up and down for their answers, and it makes people like me want to contribute more. New users typically don't have good first questions. So this is an excellent first question. They've got some code samples as well, formatted, etc. If I skip that one and look for another one, here is a typical first question that somebody would post. And you can tell it's a typical question because, oh, actually that's an answer. So I'm not going to go mad at an answer. I want a question. That's a good question. Bad first questions are ones that have one line questions, and they just say, I got this error message, what's wrong with it? That's an this isn't a great answer. Someone made this, works like a charm for me. This is what's called a link only answer. And on Stack Overflow, you are not encouraged to do a link only answer because it's not an answer. You've got to go somewhere else and define it. So it would be much better if the person provided more information. What does Python decompiler do? How has it worked? How is it particularly good? Let's try and find another example of a first question. That's an answer. Oh, okay, not beautifully formatted. So anyway, you as a community of Stack Overflow can come through and help try and review questions that have been marked to close or edit or post. Why am I mentioning this? Because there is a chat room for people who sit around all day and do nothing else other than want to close Stack Overflow questions. So they share it with each other and say, should I close this one? Or hey, can other people vote on this one? And they generally just try to close the whole thing. So there's generally a lot of people sitting in this channel at all times. So you can create chat rooms if you have enough. I would be interested in, let's see about this. What if I was to create a chat room? How do I create a chat room? If I create a new chat room, I've always wanted to have an AWS chat room. AWS chat for discussing AWS topics. I'll create a chat room in here, and the room might already exist. I did create a room before and it died because there was not enough. I don't know what that's going on about. Okay, so this is an AWS chat room. I will put this chat in the stream, and you are all welcome to come in and have a chat. Welcome to my stream, viewers. So it is possible to sort of have communication between people in AWS chat rooms. Okay. Hey, everyone's popping in now. Phew. So for those of you who have recently joined in watching my stream, hello, my name is John Rotenstein. I work for AWS. I'm a developer advocate, otherwise known as a technical evangelist. I'm in Sydney, Australia, where the sun is coming out today. It's a little bit cold. We're just entering winter down here. And COVID is not too bad here. Children are going back to school. People are starting to ride public transport again. We've managed to tame the virus pretty well here. There is talk of having a connection between Australia and New Zealand, where both countries have done very well with the virus. So we might be able to have international travel between the countries, but not elsewhere. So that's the life down here in Australia. Join me as we answer Stack Overflow questions. Let's go and have a look at some more topics here. Few that I've marked earlier today. No one has answered this one. Can a registered domain serve the same S3 bucket even if a CNAME alias is incorrect? For static website hosting, S3 uses virtual hosting, i.e. serving multiple websites from a single web server. I have two buckets set up for static website hosting without mapping DNS names to CNAME aliases. Also, hypothetically, let's say that both S3 buckets are virtual hosted on the same web server. This is unlikely, but the assumption is important for my question below. Now, if I register a domain name, say with the name bucket1, but created a CNAME alias pointing at S3 virtual style hosting for bucket2 accidentally, will I still be viewing the index page of bucket1 when I type in the domain name? I'm assuming yes, because it only sees my original host header for bucket1, blah, blah. Is AWS John Meyer from AWS? That is not me. I'm not John Meyer. No. This response is CloudFront for this topic. Ooh. So let's unpack this a few things. So talking about S3 bucket and aliases to buckets. So let's hop into S3. Let's create a bucket. So this is why I learned so much by answering Stack Overflow questions, because I try it myself. I see what we can do. We can go in here and say, please create a bucket. I will call this Stack Porn Noobs. Fantastic. I'm creating in the Sydney region because that's where I am. Let's go into that bucket. I will upload a picture. Those of you who watch me regularly will know that I enjoy pictures of strange things. Oh, I'll put my brain online, I think, this time. And I have my brain in a bucket. What is my brain? Let's have a look what my brain is. It's access denied because it's private, but that's okay. I can go to this open link, which will create a pre-signed URL that will let me open the picture. That is my brain. Okay. It looks a bit plasticky, but that's fine. We want to use static website hosting. So we go into the Properties tab. Oh, we have to go to the Properties tab for the bucket, not for the object. Properties tab, static website hosting, for which it says host a static website which does not require server-side technologies. You don't have to create a static website. The benefit is it does things like redirects your index page, your error page and all that, but you can serve directly out of S3 if you want. You should also add a bucket policy to allow your content to be accessible. Fallon King, hi, where are you calling from, Fallon King? Where you're watching from? Where's everyone watching from? It's about time we had an update of where everyone was located. In Robotville, it looks like. So I have an S3 bucket. If I go into this thing, it gives me a URL. And I can access my bucket from that URL. What I will do is go in and make that object publicly accessible. And go in here and say, make public. I can't make it public because I have block S3 access turned on. Block public access was created a while ago when people accidentally started opening up their S3 buckets to the world. They then get embarrassed that certain information is in there. So an additional layer of security by default goes on every S3 bucket that stops you accidentally making your content public. But you can come in here and say, I'm okay for things to be public. I can still block, say, bucket policies, but I'm fine for access control lists, ACLs, which are the per object permissions. Yes, I'm really sure that I want to do this. People are calling from Poland, 4 a.m. in Poland, Kuskuman. Thank you for the dedication. You sound like my teenage son who watched the whole of Upload in one night recently. So talk about binging one night for a whole season of something. Colorado, Geelong, Ted the King, Geelong down in Victoria, same time zone. Washington, Oklahoma, Brazil. Must be bedtime for you folks in Brazil. Time in Brazil. I guess it's the same as the US. 11 o'clock over there. Fantastic. Indiana. Welcome. So I come in here and I turned off block public access. I then go back into my bucket. I can then make my brain publicly accessible. My brain is now public. So theoretically, if we go to this static website hosting endpoint, which will fail, but then if I say brain.jpg, that works. But then the chat for any of you want to try and hack into my bucket, nothing else will work. So what this person is saying is they can create a CNAME record that would resolve to this URL. And theoretically, it would work, but it won't work. Let's see if we can even do this. So I have in my AWS account a Route 53, we use Route 53. In the question, the user wants to put an alias in the bucket. So in Route 53 and want to add another alias to access the specific endpoint. Yeah, it's a little confusing. Let me put a link to the question in here. So they want to, there's basically saying, hey, if I create a CNAME that points to my static website hosting URL, and AWS in theory runs lots of web servers, but if I point the wrong, if I register a domain name and point that CNAME to the same web server, how does it know? And the answer is it's complicated. So let's see if we can reproduce some of these things and show it works or not. I have a domain name here called jrclass.net based on my name, and I can create a record set. I'll call it stack.jrclass.net. I can create a CNAME record, and I don't want that. I want this CNAME. Let's go in there. I think I can just paste the name in there with my S3 website, paste it in there. This won't work, but we'll create it anyway. So if I now go in here and say I want stack.jrclass.net brain.jpg, it won't work. It might be partially due to propagation, but the fact is it won't work because S3 has no idea what bucket I want to go to. I've passed the name stack in here. It has resolved. Oh no, this should work because the CNAME record that I created does contain my bucket name in here. my Chrome search engine that searches AWS services. Oh yeah, I've got some shortcuts in here. I can do things like get me to the Lambda console, and it takes me straight there. Or I can say, take me to the pricing for Lambda, and it jumps straight out there. So as a person who works with AWS all day, especially when I was a technical trainer, I needed lots of shortcuts. So the way you can do that in Chrome is you've got the search engines. I go off on tangent all the time here. If you go into Manage Search Engines in your Chrome settings, you can not only set up ones for standard web things, but you can create things such as, here I've got a fixed URL that I go to for Stack Overflow. I just have to type S in the search bar and it will take me there. Alternatively, I can do my pricing things. So here is my little code that I do for pricing. It basically says go to this particular page and insert the name that I type into the search bar and find the pricing page. So if there are URLs that are a common format you can always use, it's a great way of doing it with Chrome search engines. So static website hosting, it does resolve to the bucket name. However, do you have to match the bucket name with the name of the URL? Static website hosting S3 custom domain, I think only works if you match the name of the bucket with the name of the URL you are trying to use. Create buckets. Yes, the bucket names must exactly match your domain name. And the reason for that is by knowing which bucket you are going to, it can then figure out where to redirect the request to get the S3 bucket. Because remember, S3 is a global service. There's lots of regions. It doesn't know which one to go to. So if you're going to create a domain name for a static website hosted S3 bucket, you have to make sure the bucket name matches the domain name. Somebody asked the question in the Stack Overflow chat room. Let's pop into that and have a look. Kuskoman, fantastic. I'm not a Kubernetes person, so if anyone knows how to answer that question, by all means pop into the chat channel, or you can always create your own question on there. So the correct answer is the bucket names must match it. So this question asker's theory that says the CNAME alias points to S3 server is not quite right. Also, S3 is huge. S3 is not just a web server with a bucket running on one web server. It's a distributed system across multiple data centers. S3 is a service that runs, it's a regional service, runs across multiple availability zones. There's a huge number of servers running S3, so it is not quite as simple as this person thought. So let's summarize a few of those thoughts. Any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans out there? Hitchhiker's Guide, fantastic thing, best watched as the original radio series out there. And there's a famous quote. Space is big, really, really big. You won't believe just how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, if you think it's a long way down to the chemist, that's just peanuts to space. And then it continues. A chemist in England is like a drugstore. So S3 is very, very big, and I have to, thanks for the fish there, Quintillion. I have to hold myself back and not put in Hitchhiker's Guide related references in here. You're allowed to put humor sort of in comments, but don't put humor in answers. Except for, I'll show off this thing, Force Padawan. Oh, damn. There was somebody who once asked a question. I'll put a link to this one for you. And they wanted to force an S3 bucket to do something. And they ended this thing with "Help me, Obi-Wan." And I couldn't help myself. I gave an answer. Amazon S3 is what gives a developer their power. It's an energy field created by objects stored in the cloud. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the internet together. Some may mock S3 because they cannot sense invisible objects in their bucket. This, by the way, was about removing versioned objects. But the wise Jedi amongst us will check whether the bucket has versioning enabled. When attempting to rid the galaxy of their bucket, they might see messages such as Force. The rebel base you tried to destroy is not empty. You must delete all versions in the bucket. If such resistance is met, sneak into into the S3 management console, select the bucket and choose versions show, and reach out with your mind. If any deleted versions of objects are displayed, delete them within this view until all objects cry out in terror and are suddenly silenced. If this does not lead to the resolution you seek, then check that your master has allocated sufficient access privileges for you to access the central computer, and this particular bucket. It is also possible the buckets have bucket policies that override the central computer via deny policies. If so, attempt to bypass security and delete the bucket policy first, then destroy the rebel bucket. You know better than to trust a strange computer. So the disappointing thing about that is it only ever got 3 upvotes, so maybe you'll all go along and they're upvoted and it'll become something popular on there. Have you ever seen those popular reviews on Amazon? Popular Amazon reviews. There's some hair removal gel that in particular, Veet. This is a very famous, put this thing in here. Is not quite safe for work, but there's some quite famous reviews here where people describe how the hair removal cream has done funny things to their dangly bits, and it's very hard to read this without dying in laughter. So all of you who have now followed this link and are reading this review are probably no longer going to listen to my stream for the next 10 minutes as you go through reading random reviews in there. So it's quite funny. So enjoy yourself. Where were we? We were answering about S3 buckets. Each bucket does not run on one server. So let's get this thing here. I will always quote where I get things from. Bucket names must exactly match your domain name. It won't work. Go away and try it. Availability zones, regions. I like to italicize my markdown to signify keywords. Yeah, a nicely formatted question. I think it's easier to read a well-formatted question and answer. So here I've done the quoting. This used to be a colored box when you quoted somebody, but they implemented dark mode in Stack Overflow recently, and a colored box doesn't make sense because do you reverse the color of the box? Do you change green to red? You make light to dark, and so they removed a lot of the shading of boxes in there. So that's a bit of formatting in there, but emphasizing things within there works very nicely. I will just do a quick cleanup and remove that hosted zone. Stack. How do I remove that? Delete record set. Bye-bye. And all of that is cleaned up. And later on, I'll have to clean up my brand out of S3 as well. Some more people have responded here. What's something on here? Somebody has responded to something that I answered earlier. Oh, it's that same question. Let's see what we're saying. So we said, try the rules target. I'm confused how this works. If I add input key value that isn't getting added to the actual event Lambda sent to me. So they're showing us what the event looks like here. So, quick recap. We are saying that a schedule is triggering a Lambda function, we want to come in here and specify a constant, and that constant should be passed down to the Lambda event. And he is now showing us the event. I say he, but I should say they. I shouldn't be gender biased. Red 888 is showing us here is the source. And why is it not coming down? It did say it should be JSON formatted. Not coming in the event. Let's try something for ourselves. Nothing like a bit of live coding to be embarrassed. So we want to try and have a schedule to pass a constant bit of text to Lambda so it knows what triggered that particular schedule. Stack constant, I'll call it. I'm a Python person. We don't actually need any permissions because we're not going to access S3 services or anything. I'll create the function. And the easiest way to do this is to just have it print the event. So whenever this Lambda function runs, it should trigger the event. If I now go to CloudWatch, I have some special stuff, and in 10-15 minutes we'll jump out to a different topic. I want to talk about SSH access methods for EC2, where I want to talk about Ec2 Incidents Connect and Systems Manager, Session Manager, which is Corey Quinn's favorite subject, and look at some deep dives into that. So we'll answer questions for a bit longer, and then we'll jump into these new modern methods of using SSH for your instances. So hang around for some of that. Okay, we now want to create a CloudWatch rule. And the rule will be on a schedule. Let's say we want to do it every couple of minutes. And I want to add a target. And the target will be my stack constant. Did I not save it? Why is it not showing up in here? That constant is saved. It's in there. What have I done wrong, folks? Stack. Oh, there it is. Thank you. And we will create a input, provide a custom input to the target based on a template. On a constant, here it is, in JSON form. I'm just going to say foobar. It's not officially JSON, but I just want to see what happens if I do that. And let's do it to trigger every 1 minute. Hello. Oh, constant must be valid JSON. Okay, we'll make it some valid JSON. Key foobar. Do I need double quotes? Okay. Rule details. Constant event. Okay, so that will hopefully trigger every minute and will pass foobar somehow to my stack thingy. I then go to the monitoring tab in Lambda. So you've been asking, what's a great way to learn how to use AWS? I guess the answer is watch other people use it. Bring a friend. Watch Master Mindio and all the videos are out there. Fantastic videos on YouTube. Some people do some great stuff. Bring a friend is a great answer. Learning AWS for the first time can be very difficult, but if you have somebody who can explain it to you, or if I can be that person, then fantastic. So eventually this will open up to some logs in CloudWatch events. So just telling you what I did there, I went to the monitoring tab, which shows invocations and errors, etc. And there's this little button that says view logs in CloudWatch. If you open that up, it goes to CloudWatch logs, where it has a log stream where it shows every execution of the function. And look at that, it worked perfectly well for me. So the event contained exactly the text that I put in there. So I don't know what that red 888 is going on about. It worked perfectly fine. So I will disable that rule so it doesn't fire off every minute. I added that as my constant. In the event. So what it looks like they've got a lot of, he says that's his event, Red 888's event, and yet I printed my event record and it just came out as that. It didn't have anything else in there whatsoever. So they might not have chosen the button. You can also do markdown formatting and comments, which is the only contents of the fantastic. Real-time conversations. Cool. How about one more question or so before we get off to SSH? This one I just want, oh, that's right. I didn't want to answer this question. I just want to point it out as a very nicely formatted question. Have a look at this person. They've got all of their variables highlighted in code, which you can do with a backwards tick in Markdown. They've got all of their code blocks looking nice. They've highlighted what they're asking. They've used numbered paragraphs. Just a joy to look at it. It's far too big for a question, I think. And actually somebody has come along and they've answered it and done quite a lot of work for answering. So please note, Stack Overflow is not a service for getting other people to do your code for you, but I was just very impressed with the, in fact, I'll give this person an uptick for doing so much work clearly on their answers, and I will give them an uptick for doing it officially. If you vote up something, it says the question shows research effort, it's useful and clear. So I like to support that. Drills with Kitty says, do you ever forget to clean up those resources for experimentation? Do you have a trick for cleaning up after yourself? It's funny that a cat is asking me such a question. And Ubzoom says, Mastermind.io teaches a whole AWS Academy, which is beginner friendly and teaches 2 to 3 hour classes 5 days a week on Twitch. I'm getting so much more interested in there. Is that actually a Mastermind? Is that also a web URL that you can go to? To resolve into something. I hope it's safe for Twitch. Oh. Be impressive. Come on. Wow. Excellent. I'm happy to plug Mastermind.io in there. And are these free academies on here? I love discovering these sort of things. We know what you're thinking. That's right. They're free. And I'm going to pass that around our company. Thank you for pointing that out. Oh my gosh, that's what he looks like now. Very good. So Kitty's asked, how do I clean up some of my resources? So I've shown this in a previous show, but I have on an Ec2 instance I've got running all the time, which I have to update my security group. Got a little shortcut to add my current IP address to my security group, will then let me into my service. I've got a cleanup directory where I have a whole lot of scripts that go and clean up things that I've done. For example, if I create an S3 bucket that happens to end with the name cheese, it will automatically go through, delete all objects in that bucket and go and delete it. So I didn't follow my rule today when I created a bucket, but I should go there and maybe do one that starts with stack as well and goes and does it. Let's do some live coding here. Clean up S3.py. This is so old, it's actually using the original Boto 1 or 2 rather than Boto 3. So I would not recommend this. Bucket name starts with stack or. Let's save that. Let's run it. That should go through and delete my stack poor noobs bucket and my brain out of it, and it's gone. So that's an example of how I clean up a lot of things each night. But I generally just try and do it a little bit manually. I was hoping there was a way to do it across all services in AWS config or something. So there is a lot of people want to create AWS accounts to temporarily play around in. So it's a great thing to give your developers a sort of sandbox account where they can create things, experiment, and not get into trouble for destroying something that's important. But you have to balance that with not too much expense. So previously on the show, we've been looking at stopinators. I also updated my Type 2 stopinator. I'll put a link to that in the show. Here is a couple of stopinators I've made. I updated my Type 2 stopinator to include notify after. So it can send notifications saying, this instance is running, this instance is running, and then after a certain amount of time, it will kill it. So that's a good thing to do with sandbox accounts. If you really want to go and destroy things, there's a great library out here called Aws Nuke. Any of you remember Duke Nukem? So Aws Nuke can go off and kill lots and lots of things in an account. So please only apply this against your sort of sandbox account where you're not running important stuff, where you have copies of your code checked in, you're not going to lose anything, but you can use Aws Nuke to go off and clean off lots of things in an account. Yeah, it's really good, and I think you can even extend it, and they keep updating it whenever you have new services in there. Another thing I want to shout out to is called Aws Inventory, and it's also on GitHub. I think it's this one, and it's really neat. It is one HTML file, and what you can do is put in your credentials. It will run and give you an immediate listing of what is on your system. So see if I can do something here. I have Aws Inventory here. I need to give it some credentials, which I don't want to expose to the world, so I'm just going to do it off on a second screen. Excuse me while I get this set up. Never expose your credentials to the world. That's some interesting text there, isn't it? Let's put that up so you can read that while I'm getting this ready. I will grab some credentials. Top secret credentials. And I will bring it back here. So what is this doing now? Aws Inventory is running in my web browser, hopefully. So here it is. It's gone off and used my credentials, which gives it access to my account. It's then going off and scanning lots and lots of things. I have lots of things in my Sydney region. So let's see if it hits Sydney here. It's going off and discovering lots of services that I have out there. Where is my instances? Oh, it looks like it's doing lots of things in parallel as well. Instances. Here's my Ec2 instances. So it's saying that I've got 3 instances that are there. 2 of them are stopped and 1 of them is running. It's giving me the names, the launch time, etc. So it's done a really, really nice job of going off and having a look. What about Route 53? Can it see my domain names in there? Here's Route 53. Got my hosted zone. So if you're going to do a sandbox environment, one thing is knowing what you've got there. The other thing is deleting it. So this is a really great tool. Just runs in a web browser. Couldn't be simpler. Really great way of doing an inventory of your content. Yeah, it's really thorough. It has lots of services. Let's have a quick look at what services there were. If I go back to Sydney, CloudWatch, Config, Direct Connect, EC2, heaps and heaps of things. Really nice bit of code. Okay, what were we doing here? Oh, I'm showing you a pretty question. That's nice. And was there a final one I wanted to do here, or we'll just skip? This dear person. I saw them come up earlier today. Uploading a Windows volume to an S3 Glacia vault, to which I say, why? I'm trying to upload my entire Windows volume to S3 Glacia, following a guide, but this works in chunks. What if my volume is 500 gig? I want to automate this so I don't have to upload in chunks. I see that tools like Fast Glacia have this capability. It's not what I'm looking for. I want it CLI based. For reference, the subject volume is live on an EC2 instance, and target is S3 vaulting Glacia. Okay, so they want to back up their Windows EC2 volume to Glacia. So the first thing I would say is why. If you want to make a backup, there is snapshots that work very, very nicely. The second thing I would say is why Glacia? So Glacia comes in two forms. The very first time Glacia came out, it gave you the ability to create vaults. Why are they called vaults instead of buckets? Because vaults sound safer. I don't know. And it's very slow to use Glacia. You send it a list, please give me a listing of my objects. And it says, okay, come back in an hour or so and I'll give you the listing. It's very slow because it's like tape. I don't think it uses tape, but it's like that. It's very batch oriented. Much easier these days to store your content in S3 and change the storage class. In fact, if we compare the pricing between them and we have a look at Glacia, Glacia stores data for as low as, how do you pronounce that? 0.4 of a cent per gigabyte per month, which sounds reasonably well priced. If we go to S3 and we look at Glacia and S3, it's the same price, 0.4 gigabytes per month. But if you go for Glacia Deep Archive, it is, oh, look at this. Marketing people must have made this. I've got to figure out my decimals here. It is less than 1/10 of a cent per gig. Thank you, marketing people. Totally ruined if I go to the Sydney region and I show it in the US dollars. It is now 2 cents per gig, so twice the price. There's these dear Americans. Oh well. So Glacia Deep Archive provided through S3 is actually lower cost than Glacia. Therefore, there is no reason to ever use Glacia. Go via S3. It's a much better interface. Things work a lot nicer. And it can be lower cost. Australia tax. Yes, there's a tax for living in Australia. We have a beautiful country. We have lovely animals that try to kill us, but things are more expensive. So thank you very much. But we are closer to China. We can get things delivered quicker, most probably. Whenever I go to eBay, I always end up buying things off China. It's fantastic. So back to this question. We don't want them to use Glacia. We want them to use S3. I also don't want them to upload an entire volume. And then they say, what if it's 500 gig? Now, this is normally where I would get out a bandwidth calculator. Bandwidth calculator. Because it's amazing how many people put questions and they want to transfer so much data that it would take too much time. So if we go in here, oh, I don't want a pretty one like that. About this one. Looking for a pretty one that even has different options for calculate time. Here it is, the time calculator. Yeah, okay. 500 gigs of data. Not the one I was looking for, but it's good enough. And there's a really, really good one out here. You can say what sort of network you have. Good bookmark it in future. S3 transfer accelerator, Mr. Bob mentions. That's a way of speeding up your bandwidth. The question asker, of course, is saying they're in EC2 and they want to go to Glacia, so this does not really apply. Okay, I'm going to give up on this. But if we have 500 gigs of data and we transfer it, let's say you've got a 10 gigabit network, because that is within your office, it would take 6 minutes to go. If you're using the internet and you're only running at 1 gig, it'd take an hour, etc. So always be mindful of the amount of data you're trying to transfer to get up there. And another doorbell ring, 1 second. And my son is nowhere to be seen to answer the doorbell. Rather than backing up your volume to Glacia. My work would kill me if I used all the 10 gig pipeline. Yeah, try and limit your bandwidth of what you're putting in there. Is it rude if I run to the front door? Entertain yourselves for a moment, please. I've never run off camera before. Woof, woof. Puppy, puppy. He probably scared them away. Also... So aside from telling him don't do it, so I'll give that advice and then I will ask a question or comment. Never put a question in your answer. You can always put it separately. It's also silly backing up the entire Windows volume that contains every printer driver known to mankind that they will never ever use. So that's why snapshots are good, because when you're snapshotting, you're only creating the delta, the difference between your volume and the original volume, which would have been an AMI from Windows. So you don't actually have to pay for the backup of most of the operating system. That's part of the standard AMI. Cool. Okay. No sound? Is no one getting sound? Have I ruined my sound? Can everyone hear me? I have sound. Any problem with your reality is your own reality. That's another Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy quote. Your own reality. When Trisha McMillan, turns off the infinite improbability drive, normality, that's it is. We have normality. I repeat, we have normality. And then she says, anything you still can't cope with is therefore your own problem. So there. Poor Noob says, why would you use Tape Gateway over S3 Glacia Deep Archive? Oh boy, now we get into Storage Gateway. So Storage Gateway is basically a service that allows you to expose AWS as a storage service locally in your on-premises environment. And there's 3 versions of Storage Gateway, or there might be more now actually. There's actually 4 versions out there. There's a gateway, cached, which basically you run an application server with a VM on there, which runs our Storage Gateway code. You store data on it and it backs it up to S3. So it's a great way of having a local disk with backup to the cloud. So if everything gets destroyed in your local data center or your local office, you've still got a copy of it up there in S3. There is also one called a file gateway that is effectively a front end to S3. So it's a bit like a shared disk volume, but instead of in this case being stored as EBS volumes, it would get stored as individual files in S3. And there is this other version which is called a virtual tape library. So if you have traditional tape backup, where you stick tapes in the machine and it backs up all your things to tape, you can create a virtual SCSI tape drive, and all of your backup systems think they're writing to tape, but it actually writes to a local virtual machine that then copies it up to S3 and stores it off in Glacia for long-term storage. So that's a nice way of getting out of the old-fashioned tape backup type things. Mr. Bob, I didn't know regarding snapshots from AMIs. Does that only apply to the AMI belonging to your own account? So this is a whole separate discussion on how snapshots work. And there's probably some very good not great, but that will do. Probably some good YouTube videos that explain these concepts. So when you create a snapshot, so let's say you've got a volume here and you've stored 10 gig of data, and you then say, please take a snapshot. It copies that 10 gig of data into S3. You don't see it in S3, it goes into our S3 bucket. But each block on the disk is copied off, and we keep an index of which blocks we used. You then go to the volume and you add another 4 gig of data and you take a snapshot. we keep an index. So snapshot A still consists of the first 10 gig. Snapshot B, what have they done here? Looks like they've changed 4 gigs of data. Snapshot B consists of the original 6 that was unchanged and the changed 4 gigs of data. And then if you go and delete some data and create another snapshot, then snapshot C remembers that 2 gigs was deleted. But all the data is retained, so you can restore the snapshot at any time. Now, the interesting thing is an AMI is a snapshot with some additional metadata. So if you launch a Windows instance, you will typically see that your disk volume is associated with a snapshot. Let's see if that happens. Kitties, is it cost effective to use storage gateways, Dropbox, G drive of sorts? Storage gateway is really to give your on-premises people a virtual disk that gets backed up to the cloud. You can also cache it, so the cloud could be bigger than local, so you can actually store lots and lots of data without having to have all the disks locally. But that's the normal use for storage gateway. Abdullah's asking, is this limited to AWS or any topic? I can answer AWS topics. I can't even answer every AWS topic, so yes, please stick to AWS. I can't answer all your problems in life. If I was to, let's give this a go. If I was to go and launch a new instance and I select, notice this AMI might come in handy. It ends with 8D. I say I would like to launch one of them, and thank you very much. That will create for me an EC2 instance and an EBS volume. And the EBS volume, Elastic Block Store volume that it's creating for me, will be associated with that AMI and will automatically load the data that I expect to be there. In fact, snapshots, it's not copying across the AMI to my snapshot. What actually happens is whenever I go to a disk block on that snapshot, it says, is this the first time they want to access that block? If so, go to the snapshot or AMI, copy that block onto my local volume and return it. So you'll notice EBS volumes are a little bit slower the first time you access a block. So some people like pre-warming their volumes. You can actually create an EBS volume now with the pre-warming option turned on, and we will automatically pre-warm it for an additional charge. So notice here, I have created a brand new EC2 instance. It associated a disk with that, and it's now saying I have a snapshot associated with this volume. I've never created a snapshot. This snapshot is the snapshot of the AMI from which I launched my volume. So if I click on that and I say public snapshots, it's listed here. It doesn't have much information, but that's the one connected with my instance. So the nice thing now is if I go and say create a snapshot of this volume, it won't copy all of the Windows stuff to S3 because it's already stored in this original snapshot. Instead, it will just copy whatever I've added, changed, deleted to that volume. So you don't pay for most of your snapshots of the operating system because we've paid for it for you already. So isn't that a lovely thing? How do we get on this topic? I think we'd finished doing some of these things. Okay, let's move on to a second topic. Phew, let's take a break. Hello, my name's John. We are working through AWS questions on Stack Overflow, but now time for something different. Let's play around a little bit with SSH to finish off our show. Thanks to all of you who have hung around this far, either listening in the background or paying amazing attention to what's going on here. And the thing I'd like to talk about is SSH. There's lots of people who ask SSH questions on Stack Overflow. Officially, it's a programming question and answer site, but people ask questions about it. So I've just launched that instance, and I can probably log into it. If I grab the IP address, and I have a little shortcut command that I have here. So it points to my personal key pair. So I can just say, run that little script for me, go to that particular IP address, and it's logged into my instance. So it's just run a simple SSH command using my private key pair to log into the instance. For those of you not too familiar with SSH, how it works, on an Linux instance, there is a SSH directory. Let's whack up the size a bit. And within that SSH directory, anything to not need a Bastion host, there is an authorized keys file. And inside the authorized keys file is a public key. It's okay for you to see this. This is the public half to my key pair. And when I logged in and pointed to my private half of my key pair through the wonders of public-private key exchange. I've read the RFC on this and my brain explodes with complex mathematics, but basically it manages to send my private key pair. The instance compares it to the public key pair and says, because my public key pair is in the authorized keys file of the EC2 user, and I am trying to log into the EC2 user on that particular machine, it will let me log in to doing it. Is it on by default? I'm not sure, Buzz, what you're referring to. Is it on by default? So that's normal SSH. I give it my private key pair, it validates that it comes through. Also on your instance, you need to have a security group. Let's have a look at the security group that it associated with that particular instance. And that security group said, because it knew I was launching a Linux instance, it associated port 22. So it opened up port 22 to the entire world, which is not always safe. So I can go in here and I can say, please lock that down to my particular IP address. And bang, I'm the only person who now theoretically can SSH into that system. SSH, is it on by default? Yes, on Linux systems, SSH is on by default. You can't SSH to a Windows instance, but you can install an SSH daemon background process that can accept SSH now that Windows is getting better at understanding Unixy type things. Mr. Bob is also saying retrieval costs. Yes, for Glacia, be very careful about retrieval costs, things there. RDP is another topic that we'll get to slightly. So step one, I created an instance. I used a key pair. I logged into it quite nicely. Guess what? There are some companies that don't allow you to create an SSH connection through their corporate firewall out to the internet and out to AWS. So they need another way of accessing an instance. And we have a few different options for you here in the console. So we have this thing called Ec2 Incidents Connect. Let's see if it will work for me. It opens up a web browser, goes to an AWS address, and tries to create a connection for me. And will the gods align? There's two things happening in this thing, if it's going to work. My security group is too restricted. How timely to mention that. I will go back and edit that security group. So the interesting thing here is under Ec2 Instance Connect, I've created a browser connection to AWS, and it is establishing the SSH connection for me. Therefore, it is coming from a different IP address, and therefore my change that I made to my security group rules will block it. So if I open this up to anywhere, and then try and connect again, EC2, please connect. Is Ec2 Instance Connect available for RDP Windows? No, but I'll get to that. Okay, so now I'm into my instance. So a quick review of what happened here. My web browser opened up to a Ec2 Instance Connect service. That service, I connected to it via HTTPS. So even if my corporate firewall blocks SSH on port 22, if I have HTTPS to go to the internet, which most companies would have, I can get to this service. This service then established an SSH connection to my instance, and I had to open up the security group to allow it from the range of IP addresses used by that AWS IP address ranges. So it would have come from, there's a special way to get the IP address ranges. There is a link in the documentation if any of you are interested in seeing that. And it gives you a very big JSON file. And this JSON file contains it. So if I say instance connect, Amazon Connect is our phone service. So if I say instance connect, here it is. So you've got to look for the appropriate ranges for Ec2 Instance Connect and allow those appropriate ranges to come into your Ec2 instance. Does this service use dynamic IPs? How can you lock it down to just this one? You can't. You've got to open up your security group on the instance to the appropriate range for your region of Instance Connect. So it's not great from locking down a security group, but what else does it do? So when I'm here, What it actually does is it creates a, notice I didn't give it a key pair. No key pair required. It creates a temporary key pair. It pushes the key pair through the instance metadata, the thing you normally use to pass through your startup script. It actually sends the temporary key through the metadata. Then it then goes to establish a normal SSH connection. And there's a little bit of extra code installed on Amazon Linux 2. When the SSH connection is established, it jumps out to a bit of Amazon code that looks in the metadata, grabs that key pair and checks if it's the key pair that is being used to establish the session. If it works, it says to the SSH process, please allow this person to come in. And that only works for like 30 seconds. So it creates a temporary key pair, pushes it to the instance, triggers a connection, they all verify and it lets you in. So the really great result is you don't need a key pair to do it. What you do need is IAM permissions to call Instance Connect. Oops, not the one. Let's see, AWS permissions, EC2 Instance Connect. And as long as the person has permissions to call Instance Connect on that instance, then where's the policy? Where's the configure IAM permissions for EC2 Instance Connect? They need this thing. Instance Connect send SSH public key, because it's not the connection process that's being controlled. It's the ability to send that temporary public key to the instance, which the instance will then use to allow you in. So be very, very careful. The problem here, what are you running here? Is it CentOS or Red Hat? The agent is installed on Amazon Linux 2 by default. Amazon Linux 2 or later and Ubuntu 20.04 or later come pre-configured with it, or you can install it on other systems. Install SSH, blah, blah, blah. So this is dangerous. And the reason why this is dangerous is anyone who has this permission, where is that permission again? Here it is. EC2 Instance Connect, send public key. Anyone who has the permission to do this can log on to an EC2 Linux instance, because they can push through a new key pair and connect to it. So rather than giving everyone star.star access to your whole account, be very careful about who can call this API call. You can also put a condition in the IAM policy to say they can only log into this instance, or maybe instances tagged with developer on there. But it's a really, really nice way, because you can use a web browser to connect into an EC2 instance, and it still uses SSH in the backend, the normal SSH connection. Let's go for another topic. This is going to be Systems Manager. So the AWS Systems Manager includes something called the Session Manager, which gives it the world's most awful name. It is the AWS Systems Manager Session Manager. Marketing people should be shot. And the Session Manager allows you to connect into an EC2 instance, Linux or Windows. And the reason it does that, and it's not working there, I've got to figure out why in a moment. It has to have an agent installed on the instance. That agent punches out from the instance and registers itself with, oh, I know why it didn't work, because I didn't give it a role. The agent running on the instance punches out to the internet, registers itself on AWS and says, I'm an instance, I'm ready to be accessed. And the real benefit of that is it works even if you have an instance in a private subnet. Let's change the role. Now, when you do this, the instance has to have some permissions so it can register itself on Systems Manager. So I just gave it some permissions. I'm going to reboot that instance, and that will hopefully register itself. Paul Noob says terminal services. It's sort of like that. So, quick recap. You launch an instance with the agent installed. When the thing boots up, it uses the IAM role to register itself with AWS and says, I exist. You can then use Systems Manager, Session Manager to establish a connection to the agent running on that instance. All your commands will be sent to the agent runs it locally and sends you back connections. So it's not really doing SSH, it's really doing remote command running. The benefit is this can work on an instance that is in the private subnet. You don't need security groups open. It just needs a way to get from that instance to the outside world to register itself. VPC endpoints might be good for doing that as well. So if I refresh this display now, we can see I've got my instance running. I can then say, please start a session with this thing. And again, it opens up in a browser, and by default, it logs you in as SSM user, but you can change that default setting to go in as EC2 user. So it's your instance running quite nicely. So that's another way of connecting in. So the difference between, so SSH, you need a direct connection to the instance and a security group open. EC2 Instance Connect, you go via a web browser to AWS that then establishes an SSH connection for you using a temporary key pair that it creates, no key pair required. SSM, again, as long as you have permissions to open an SSM session, then it will talk to the agent and create the connection for you. Again, no key pair required. Again, be very careful. If people have those permissions, they can hop into your production systems. You want to make sure that you've locked them down sufficiently. And so there's a question in there about, can you do it with RDP? And the answer is yes. I have this particular question where somebody was saying, can I use Systems Manager port forwarding? And I'm just going to jump ahead to the answer I gave on this previously. And what I did is I launched an EC2 instance with Windows. I gave it a role that gave it permissions to register under SSM, so it could talk back. I configured the security group to have no inbound connections, so nothing could establish a connection to that instance. It was effectively like being in a private subnet, no communication whatsoever. When I ran Session Manager, the Windows instance appeared quite nicely. And then they've got this amazing thing called port forwarding. So when from my Mac, I triggered the SSM session to start, and I gave it a command to turn on port forwarding, which is a document you run under Systems Manager. And I told it to forward my local port to the remote one. And what I was then able to do was establish a remote desktop RDP connection to my local host, which would automatically port forward to the other system via the Session Manager agent, and I could successfully RDP into an instance that had no security groups allowing inbound access and can even be in a private subnet. So really great ability to use Session Manager to connect into your instances, including Windows. So SSH is sort of old-fashioned. These are the newer ways of doing things. So it's well worth being aware. Just you've got to play around a bit in Session Manager with the permissions, so that it can report back to the agent. And in Instance Connect, you've got to get your security group right to point back to AWS. So that is basically it. So that brings us up to about 2 hours. That's probably enough fun and games for chatting here. Thank you to everyone who has hung around this far. Let's see if you are participating in the chat room. Fantastic. We have you chatting. The chat room automatically sort of disables itself after a period of non-chatting. So we'll see how long this chat room continues. I'll monitor. Oh no, that's not. Yes, it is this room. I'll have a look in there to see if I can answer any questions. Always post your own questions if you want, but happy to have a bit of a discussion in there for people who watch this show. So thank you very much. And now next week, I'll be moving 1 day earlier. So set your watches for this time 1 day earlier, 2 hours ago when I started, because we are starting to stream the AWS certification quiz show yet again. And we will be streaming the certification quiz show, and then afterwards I'll be streaming this show. So 1 day earlier from next week. So thank you very much for everyone out there. I'm going to go off and visit Mastermind.io as well. And have a good AWS day. Thank you very much.